Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched Hocus Pocus 2. And I'm going to be real upfront with you, it's real bad. It makes Hocus Pocus 1 seem like a great piece of cinema. There's that. You can leave now if you want to. Hocus Pocus 2. Boy, what a weird thing to make a sequel for. The original Hocus Pocus, which we looked at a couple of weeks ago now, had a pretty clear arc to the story and a pretty firm ending that didn't leave a lot of room for there to be a sequel. It's also not super great as a movie. It's something that probably should have been left in the 80s. And the apparent... I don't understand. It's probably money reasons, right? That we see the sequels that we do and not the ones we don't. Because this movie was clearly, or at least should have been, very cheap to make. It looks bad. Just spoilers for that bit. It looks bad, and it looks like it was made extremely cheaply. And I could understand why they might make this, if only to appease or not even appease, to get money out of fans. But what's even weirder than that is that it is a Disney Plus exclusive, meaning that it is basically the equivalent of a straight to DVD or straight to VHS release, a la Disney of the 1980s and 1990s. Making sequels to things that didn't require sequels in order to either bait nostalgia or get money from people whose kids just saw characters they recognized and wanted more. What's weird is that in the era of streaming services with monthly subscriptions, as far as I'm aware, this at no point had any additional fee tacked onto it. I know at some points Disney has added additional viewing fees on top of the normal subscription in order to cover the cost of people not going to the theater and not paying that theater money. That's not the case here. This seems to have been entirely a straight to streaming production. And it shows because the level of care here is extremely minimal. Nobody seems to have done much work at all, if I'm totally honest. Everything about this film feels cheap, and it doesn't seem like it needs to exist narratively, and I don't see the demand being big enough to warrant creating this, at least not this badly. You would think that if this was a franchise they intended to continue on in any respect, that they would give it a little bit more than this. But as it is, this movie feels like it is made for somewhere between 7 and 10-year-olds, maybe up to 14 or 16 if you're really, really pushing it and those kids are kind of dumb. I mean, all kids are kind of dumb, but that's a separate issue. And I'm just confused by it. If you were a big fan of the original Hocus Pocus, I don't think you will like this very much. Unless you are the kind of person, and I'm not going to attack anyone for this or their... but there's a certain kind of person who can see past or look past all the flaws in something and purely have enjoyment in something based on its nostalgia. And as I've repeatedly said, I am not only not that, but I am actively offended by nostalgia bait. And even if that was the case, And they do attempt it to some extent in this movie. There's a lot of things that are like, oh, you remember this thing? Oh, you remember that thing? Oh, you remember these characters? Oh, they're back again. We're teasing that we're gonna do this thing. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. And it's a lot of that. I would say a solid like 20% of the film is, well, no, that's a solid 20% of the film is overt. Hey, you remember that. And a solid 30 to 40% more is more subtle, just milking of the existing movie. There's really not a lot here. Obviously, they brought back the three witches. They look surprised for it being basically 30 years ago. They've all aged, I think, fairly gracefully. Like nothing stands out as like somebody's caked with makeup or has like it looks dramatically different or something like that. It all more or less works as much as it can for a 30-year late a sequel 30 years later. It's it's just rough. The script is atrocious. It's just bad all around. It's a largely and it's basically a fully new cast of characters. There are a few new characters who I actually do like, and a few returning who I actually do like. I have to point out, I didn't recognize or I don't believe I pointed out in the Hocus Pocus 1 video was that one of the minor characters is actually played by Doug Jones, and Doug Jones is fantastic and wonderful, and deserves all the credit in the world for being the make or break element in a lot of movies. Some of them good, some of them not quite so good. And so him returning as Billy Butcherson, minor spoiler there, but I don't think it's a spoiler because I think he's even on the cover maybe, he's always great, so it's hard to complain. There's a couple of other folks who show up anew and either do the thing they were asked to do well enough, or do their own thing. So I shout out to Sam Richardson, who was in, what was the name of that film we watched? The werewolf one. God, it's been so long since I watched that now that I can't remember what it was. He's perfectly serviceable. He does his best with what's clearly a very wanting script. He's emotive and puts on a decent performance. I also really like Tony Hale, who is great in a lot of things and is clearly just chewing the shit out of the scenery in this movie because he was given nothing to work with. And so even though he basically doesn't need to exist in the film, and under different circumstances, I might say just, to be one of the many things that needs to be cut out of this film, his mere presence and his willingness to just go above and beyond is excellent. The rest of this really feels a lot like the Ghostbusters reboot. That was the feeling I got. And obviously the Ghostbusters reboot has a whole lot of discussion that's been had around it. And I don't want to give anyone the wrong idea that this is some sort of like, oh, why'd they reboot it this way kind of thing. It's the same kind of, we don't understand. It's the same kind of things of, we don't understand why the original was interesting or good. We don't seem to have consulted the original very well. We're going against a bunch of things that existed in the original thing and are actively going to alienate our fan base. And just that the overall production and writing is pretty bad. There's also a substantial element of this film that feels like it could have been ad-libbed. It's not quite as like over the top and just awful as the Ghostbusters reboot. but it still feels like it could be in that vein of being just we didn't write anything, so I don't know, fill time. That said, when they do make an effort to put on a big performance, the big performance is really bad. There's a musical segment in the middle of the film that is like the music hits and it's a pop element it's a pop song that you've heard before, I guarantee you have, and you're just like, oh, are they really doing this? And I was really tempted to just leave the room, or watch it on mute or something. The problem is that is also the segment during which they do a whole bunch of like montage plot dump for some reason, just to like press things forward, because clearly nobody knew anything about how to operate pacing on a movie. So it's just this like 5-minute segment where you're really annoyed by this musical cover, and then you also have to actually pay attention because it's wrapping up a bunch of threads, because rather than actually writing those threads to a conclusion that would be logical, it just does this, and it's bad. It's so bad. The rest of the casting is acceptable and workable. There's nothing really wrong with the rest of the casting. The main three girls who replaced the main kids in the first film are all fine. They're not putting on much of a performance, but they don't have a lot to work with either, so it's hard to overtly blame them for that. But they're not helping. And the overall arc just is bizarre because it comes to a conclusion that is just out of the blue and completely atonal feeling. The ending of the film, one, seems completely wrong. It's just like they cut in a different film at the end, where it's just like, wait, what? Why is everybody? Why the tonal shift? Why are these characters completely giving up on all of the things that they have done for the rest of this film, no matter how good or bad those things may have actually been? And then it milks it for like 20 fucking minutes. And this movie is so stretched out already. It's not even, it's like an hour and 45, which is already kind of long for a movie targeted at this demographic. And it's not even using that time well. It's just, it's just a mistake after mistake. And on top of all that, I don't know what the budget was on this. Nobody seems to know what it was, but it looks cheap. Like all of the film, or all of the cinematography is very flat. When they try and do anything with the camera, it feels amateurish or like film student kind of thing. It's like all of the lighting is just straight up ugly. And I'm like, looks like it was all done on a soundstage. When they do very overt green screening, the green screening is awful. Like I have not seen a green screen work in a major motion picture from a major studio this bad in a very long time that I can think of. Like it's nobody did a first pass on the rotoscoping. Nobody did like any cleanup on the edit. It's just, it looks unfinished. And so in addition to being cinematically uninteresting, visually unappealing and ugly, the largely digital effects all being very bad. The first shot in the film is, no, it's not the first shot. The first shot in the second element of the film is, no, it's not. Okay, there's some CGI near the beginning that is really, really bad, and you immediately go, oh no, we're in for a ride, aren't we? And as far as I can tell, practical effects use is extremely limited. Um, but I don't know. I feel like I'm just harping on it too much at this point. There's so little to say. There's so little of value in here. I think if you watch the original and you love it and you're in disagreement with me and think it's actually great, then you probably also won't be happy with this. And if you didn't love the first one, then I think you're going to be even more annoyed by this, by the first one, than you're going to be even more annoyed by the second one. It's just bizarre to me that they wouldn't use this as an opportunity to take a movie that was already a flop and revamp it and actually make an effort on it. And instead, it feels like a sad cash grab. It also has some elements of, like, on the plus side, diverse cast, great. You know, there are some elements of this that are like, not only is the casting diverse, but the background elements also show a modernization that gets away from a lot of the historical Disney problems in their live action stuff of showing a very narrow band of what life looks like for people. On the other hand, some of the writing and some of it feels really heavy-handed, like, we're hip, we're cool, we're with the times, we also like progressive things. Kids, you like those things, right? We are here to do those things because we're a media outlet. And it just feels disingenuous. So, on the one hand, happy that there's some diversity and, you know, those things actually are happening. On the other hand, wish it was happening for better reasons or more competently done. Yeah, besides that, I don't have a lot else to say. It's just sad. If you already have Disney Plus, then I guess you could waste your time worse ways with some of the garbage that's on there. But I can't in good conscience recommend it. It's pretty bad. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been your host, the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.